It's time now for the Success is Subjective podcast. Here is your host and therapeutic consultant for young adults only, Joanna Lilley.
Hi, and welcome to the show. If you're new here, I'm glad to have you. This podcast was formed to collectively build a bank of stories from normal people sharing their non-linear paths. Unfortunately, social media paints a narrow picture of what success looks like, so I'm doing my best to spread the news that changing course is common, and you don't have to know what you want to do the rest of your life at 18. If you're a parent worried about your young adult and whether their path is leading them to success, you're in the right place. I'm a therapeutic consultant who works with young adults to connect them with resources that'll help them get back on that path to success. So if you're curious, let's chat. You can schedule a consultation through my website. Today, my guest is Dr. Bianca Busch. Dr. Busch is the founder of the College Psychiatrist, a pioneering mental health practice focused on supporting college students and their families through compassionate, evidence-based care. With training in adult psychiatry from the University of Chicago and child psychiatry from Harvard's Boston Children's Hospital, she specializes in a holistic approach to mental health, addressing anxiety, depression, OCD, and more. Dr. Busch is passionate about creating inclusive mental health care and supporting college students during their most vulnerable moments. She resides in Texas with her loving husband and children. And here is Dr. Busch. All right, Dr. Busch, thank you for being a guest on the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm so excited. I don't even remember how it was that I stumbled upon your website, but as soon as I did, I was like, I don't have to know you, but I have to have you as a guest on the podcast. So I'm just like extra tickled that you took the time to have this conversation with me late on a Wednesday evening.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's fill the listeners in. Tell us, where did you grow up? Because I think that helps paint a picture kind of culturally of, what's infused around education, family, expectations, etc. And then tell us, what did you do after high school?
Okay. Yeah. So I was born in Colorado, Aurora, right outside of Denver, and then moved to Albuquerque when I was pretty young, Albuquerque, New Mexico. So that's really where I spent most of my life growing up. And, Albuquerque, New Mexico is not known as a state with the best education. And the school that I went to was really just very average, or maybe even below average, but it was my neighborhood high school. I loved it. I had a great time, home of the Knights, go Del Norte. And so I had a great time, very involved, and had success there academically, really, took advantage of the advanced courses and had a great time learning. And I'm from a family of educators. My mom is a teacher. Both of her parents were teachers. So education is always very important in our family. And it was never, are you going to college, but where are you going is really kind of the thing. And so I'm fortunate that my grandparents were college educated, which is not very common. They went to schools here in the South, in Texas, and my mom as well. So just having that really strong foundation, like education is important, no matter what you do. And there wasn't really a big push to do anything in particular, but just to make sure, as they would say in the South, that you got your lesson.
I love that. Okay. So it wasn't a question of, are you going to college, but rather, where are you going? So what did you end up doing? Where did you go?
Yeah. So I ended up going to the University of Chicago. I applied to a few different places. And back then it was very different from the application landscape. I think I applied to 4 places total. I did the applications myself. Like, I don't even think my mom helped me. And so, but I did have an uncle who was from Chicago and said, hey, you should check out this school. I think you would like it. And he took me for a visit as an early graduation present. And I did. And I was like, Chicago's awesome. So I applied. I also had the option of going to the University of New Mexico, where I grew up. And, but I was like, oh, Chicago. Yeah, I want to go there. And then I also heard that the University of Chicago was a great place for smart people. And I considered myself to be a smart person. So I was like, okay, I will go here. So that is where I ended up going. And it was a shocker, to say the least.
I'm over here chuckling because I'm thinking, I love when people tell me about the reason that they picked a place and how did it work out or did it end up being, like you said, it was a shocker. So tell us about the transition, because I think this actually is a good segue at a future point in this interview to talk about who you work with, which is college age students, right? Especially those that are kind of struggling in this transition. So tell us what was that adjustment like?
Yeah. So, I mean, going from Albuquerque, which I used to know the population size off the top of my head. I want to say it was like maybe 500,000 at that time. It was small, to Chicago. I was so proud of myself. The first week that I got there, I caught a cab to church on my own. I was like so proud, and like navigating the bus system, because we didn't really, public transportation, we had it in Albuquerque, but it wasn't huge. Most people had cars. Or a lot of people had cars anyway. So there was adjusting to sort of the city life, which I felt like I was up for the task. I was adventurous, really got plugged into my dorm community and then other sort of orgs on campus. So that, I've always had an easy time doing that. That was no problem. Making friends and that kind of thing. But academically, it was just very different. It was so rigorous, and I had not been trained to really think and regurgitate knowledge in the ways that they were asking me to. And I was, of course, very smart by my high school standards, but that didn't compare. And I know this is a common experience for many students that I serve, and just many students in general, right? Like, you are the best of the best at your high school. And then you get to the university and you feel like you're dumb because everyone else is smarter. And for me, I had gone to a public high school. I mean, even in Albuquerque, I probably could have gone to Albuquerque Academy, which is like a fancier private school, or St. Pius, which is a fancier parochial school. But I decided to stay at public school. And then you get to the University of Chicago, where people have gone to Exeter and like all of these like, big fancy boarding schools, or even within Illinois, the Illinois Math and Science Academy, that really prepares you for the setting. So I found myself underprepared in a lot of ways and just intimidated. And it really, really took a hit on my self-esteem, I would have to say, because I just didn't feel smart.
Yeah, it almost paints the picture of like imposter syndrome. Like you said, like here I was thinking that I'm ready. These are my peers. And then all of a sudden you're having a pretty stark reality check of, no, you are still smart. It's a matter of that preparation or adjustment of how you study or studying or regurgitating information differently. Okay, so what did you end up doing?
So I ended up, things were rough there for a bit. I mean, I was getting C's in my science classes because I was a pre-med the whole time, because I knew I wanted to be a doctor. So I was taking the sciences and they were kicking my butt. It was not like, multiple choice. It was like one question and a blank piece of paper, and you've got to essentially prove whatever it was, right? It's a different way of testing. And so I had a really rough time. I think I ended up getting a D in genetics. And I'm saying all of this because I think that the more I share my story, the more I realize that some students are under the impression that everything has to be perfect, and it doesn't. And so I had a really rough time until I found the social sciences. Now, this is the beauty of a liberal arts education. I didn't even know that I would like the social sciences, but we had to take some. And I think we had to take sociology, an intro sociology course, and I found the content really interesting. So then I learned a little bit more, and my major ended up being human development, which is a combination of psych, soc, anthro, and bio. That was fun. I mean, like, you're talking to people, you're studying them, you're figuring out why they do things that they do. That's like right up my alley. And I continued on the sciences, and I got better as time went on. And so, at one point I found myself on the dean's list. I was very proud, but overall I didn't finish with very high GPAs. I think my science was like a 2.5, and maybe my overall was maybe a 3.0. I can't remember. I'd have to look back, but I like to just, again, be upfront and say like what things were, because, people at that time, I was pre-med, and the pre-med advisor said, hey, medicine's not for you. You should consider public health. You should consider something else. I did have one mentor who recommended maybe doing a post-bac, but the confidence in me was pretty low from the people inside of the academy. Now, my community, they called me Dr. Pullen. That's my maiden name. They believed in me no matter what. And so that really was a huge part of my story and saving grace and encouragement to go on, because they always believed in me, even when I was not getting that feedback from the institutions or even the people who were supposed to be advising me to pursue medicine.
Yeah. Having worked in higher education, I can say that the conversations were always like err on the side of being conservative or like under-reporting, under-suggesting, just in the sense to like see, okay, set the bar low and then you're okay. But if you end up like achieving something higher, like that's awesome.
Yeah.
What I'd rather not do as an advisor is put you in a situation where you're on a path where it's like, there's no way you could ever achieve.
Yeah. And I think definitely people would say there's no way that was going to happen for me. So, yeah.
But it did at a certain point. So let's continue this journey. Where did you go after you graduated?
So after I graduated, I knew I didn't really want to stay in Chicago. Again, just sort of having that hit on self-esteem. So I went back home to Albuquerque and I lived at home for 2 years. I worked for the WIC program, which is a subsidy program for pregnant women, infants, and children. And I worked as a public health nutritionist, and it was a lot of fun. I always loved working with families. I got to teach nutrition classes. I got to see the kids. It was really a fun job. And then, it's for those who know what it's like to move back home after you've been on your own. I was like, I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of here fast. This is enough of this. And so I ended up finding out about a fellowship with the Congressional Hunger Center. And with that program, it's a year long. You get placed somewhere in the country for 6 months, and then you're in DC for 6 months. I was placed in Boston for the first 6 months, and then in DC. And so I did that program. And when I was in Boston, I met a fantastic mentor, Dr. Deborah Frank, and she's amazing. She ran a clinic. She's a researcher, just smart. She was like maybe one of 2 or 3 women in her Harvard Medical School class. Just brilliant, trailblazer. So I asked if I could work for her because I interacted with her in the hospital through my fellowship, and she said she had a position available. So after my fellowship ended, I went and worked for her as a clinic coordinator. And I did that for 4.5, 5 years. And I retook most of my sciences in the night at the Harvard Extension School. So, some days I'd be riding my bike up and down Mass Ave, Boston, Mass Ave, which is like not super safe, but it's like faster than the bus. And so, and that learning community was great. And what I know about myself, then I think I was starting to realize it, but what I know now is I will work hard. If there's an opportunity to work hard, I will do it. And so the office hours, I was there. I was like, I don't have anything else better to do. Like, this is what I'm focused on. So I would literally go there and do my problem sets in the office hours and ask the TAs if I got stuck. I would just stay there and do the whole thing. And so that is really how, I learned about sort of my learning style, how I succeed, that I could succeed. And this is like really important because I was able to prove it to myself again, like, hey, yeah, you are smart. You might just need a little more time. And my mentor, Dr. Frank, she's a pediatrician and developmental and behavioral pediatrician. She said, I see you working hard. I see it. You work for me. You're fantastic. I don't understand why you've had such a hard time academically. I think there's something going on and you should get tested. And I said, okay. Of course, testing is very expensive. So once I figured out how to work the system and I was doing well, it was kind of like, okay, maybe I don't need the testing because I figured out how to overcome. But that was a seed that had been planted. And so anyway, I worked hard, took my MCAT again. I just made a Reddit post about like the change in my MCAT scores because again, people saw that first MCAT, they'd say, sis, give it up. But, I did my classes, got some tutoring, got a good MCAT score, interviewed, got into medical school at the University of Colorado. And so finished up that position and went back to Colorado where I was born and have a lot of family. And that's where I went to medical school.
Yeah. And having lived in Colorado, I know that the University of Colorado's medical that campus is legit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
wow.
It is. Yeah. I felt so fortunate, so blessed to be admitted there. and, able to study in what is kind of my hometown, since that's where I was born. And, you could really see the campus from my grandmother's house. It's like that close. So I went there, and then, here we are again, beginning of school. It's anatomy, and I'm busting my hump in the lab, in the anatomy lab, after hours, just really trying to get this down. And I barely passed. And I was like, this can't be. I feel like I worked so hard. And so from that point, I was like, I had Dr. Frankenmeyer saying, like, you should get tested. And so at that point, I decided to get some help. I reached out to the academic support center, got some tutoring, and eventually got an appointment with a neuropsychologist and got tested and was diagnosed with ADHD, and then just learned a little bit more about how I learned through that testing process. And so, I think that I definitely am not a person who had a lot of family to rely on for resources, right? So I also like to highlight that, because people think like, oh, the testing is expensive, there's no way I can ever get it done. But I just feel like where there's a will, there's a way. And that testing is so helpful if you need accommodations. Like you can't supplement for that with a letter from a psychiatrist or even a psychologist or your therapist. Like really to have those objective measures that come with the testing is so powerful. So I encourage people, it was a big chunk of money, but as a student, you're I'm still paying for all of this because that's how it goes. But it was really worth it for me to make that sacrifice to get the testing, to figure this out. And then I can get accommodations and really know more about myself along the way. And then it was also great because I learned, like, again, you are smart, right? Because you're going to do some IQ testing in that. Yeah. And it's like, no, I'm not dumb. It's just that I have a different learning style and different learning needs.
Yeah. That part of your story could not be better timed, because I am speaking with two parents right now that are really they're just wrestling with, well, what's the benefit of doing the testing? And it's like, oh my gosh, I'm literally just going to be like, listen to this clip.
Yes.
Just listen to this clip.
Listen, if people, and I say, even if you don't feel like you have the means, and this is one thing that Dr. Frank told me is like, find the local university. Somebody is training and needs someone to train on, and you can get a discounted rate. Yeah. Ask if you can get a payment plan with the psychologist that you're working with. If you're young enough, it may be covered by your insurance, right? If you're a student who's, around 18 or less than 18, it could be parts of it could be covered by your insurance company if the psychologist who's testing you takes insurance. So it's just really worth it to explore. So tell them to listen back to this and please do it for their kids.
Yeah. Okay. So you finally made it through. Mm-hmm. How did you get from graduating to the work that you're doing now? Because med school, I think the other thing in all of this, and maybe I'm jumping too far ahead. So I'm just trying to keep pace on time too.
Sure.
I'm thinking about how we get from graduating med school to potentially a residency. And okay.
Yeah. So, again, still, even though got the testing, it still had academic struggles. And this is more about anxiety, right? And so this is what I've recently written a book on, is test anxiety. Figured out that I had that. I ended up working with a therapist during medical school to work through some of that anxiety because I failed step 1, which is one of our big first major board exams. And so I had to retake it. And one of the keys for me being successful the second time around was working through my test anxiety. So go through all that. You take all of your steps. Clinicals, excellent. Of course, I did. I'm not ashamed to brag on that. That went very well. 3rd year, 4th year. And then it comes to applying for residency. I ended up getting in at the University of Chicago, which I wanted to go to a place where I could learn how to be a therapist in addition to being someone who prescribes medicines. So that program is particularly strong in that area. So it was kind of back to where I had been under different circumstances. I kind of left as an undergrad, not feeling great, and I'm coming back as a resident and feeling like I can do this. So that was really nice. Spent 3 years there, and then decided to continue my training, doing a fellowship in child and adolescent psychiatry at the Boston Children's Hospital. All along, I knew that I wanted to do therapy. Most of the time, I knew I wanted to have my own practice so that I could have the freedom to do therapy and prescribe medicines. And so I started my practice when I was a 2nd-year fellow. My program directors were kind enough to let me start my practice then. And the rest is kind of history. I've had a few like jobs here and there in that time, but I really have been just seeing folks virtually and in person since then. And I love it. I love what I do.
And it shows, right? I'm sure people could hear it in your voice, but I'm seeing it on your face. Like you're very clearly excited about the work that you do. And I also I loved hearing more about your personal story because now it just makes even more sense too, how you are the perfect person to do what you're doing for the young people that you're working with.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah. And I guess one thing I left out was when I was having a hard time at the University of Chicago, I did go and try to go for some help. I ended up at the student counseling center and they said, oh, you're depressed. You should probably start an antidepressant medication. I probably was depressed, but I also had some different learning needs. You know what I mean? And so it's like my goal now in my work is really to have that holistic picture of who someone is. And so maybe they are having trouble with anxiety or mood, but let me think about also what's happening with their learning. Let me think about what's happening in their environment. And so that is what I really just relish and delight in, is really thinking holistically about who this person is and what the best intervention is going to be.
Thank you for doing that, taking the time to look at the whole person, because that is, I'm not going to totally, dump on psychiatrists or medical providers in general. Yeah. I just think that there's an opportunity to really make sure that we take that extra step to really understand what is going on, because humans are complex.
Humans are complex. And I again am fortunate because I have started this practice and I have control over how I practice. But if I were in a hospital setting, I would not be able to do the therapy. I would be forced to probably have much shorter appointments where I can't get the information that I need always. So I do recognize the privilege that I have being a solo practitioner, one who directs my own practice, that I can take the time. And then I can decide too, if I need more time, then I say I need more time. And I find that people are okay with that. They would rather me take more time than less. So.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm over here smiling because I'm just thinking about I wish that I had another hour and a half, because I would just we would go on some tangents talking about a bunch of different things, but we don't have time for that. Yeah. I think that this has been the perfect amount of time for people to hear your journey, get a sense of who you are. And then obviously we're going to link everything in the show notes, but talk about it. Yeah. How do people find you? And I'll just say, here's my little asterisk. I love your website because it is so user-friendly, and I love that it has the map of all of the states where you're licensed. It's okay, thank you for doing that. It's so easy right out of the gate. So
I'm going to share that with my team. You don't know, that map took a lot of coding and effort. So after this, I'm going to tell my team, hey guys, people love it, because we worked really hard on that website. You can find me at collegepsychiatrist.com. You can find me on pretty much all the social channels: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. And I just joined Reddit, but you can't find me that easily on Reddit. So the other ones are all at College Psychiatrist. Well, I did start a Reddit thread, test anxiety Reddit thread. So I'll be posting there. But anyhow, I'm on all of those platforms. On the website, you'll find information about the practice, how to get connected. You'll find information about, again, the book that I've just written, Test Anxiety No More. And then the platforms is really, I'm just giving people as much advice as I can. I see folks one-on-one in my clinical practice, and the point of me really trying to branch out to social media and write is to share the knowledge that I have with more people. So those are the ways that you can find me. If someone's interested in the clinical practice, I usually meet with folks for free 15 minutes, and I can get to know them. They can get to know me, ask questions, and then we go from there. So I think, and I also forgot. So I have the book, talked about that. I also have some fun care packages for college students, which, they're on Etsy. So you can really just search College Psychiatrist, have a channel on there. And it's a mental health focused package. It's got lots of stuff for relaxation. There's a journal in there. So many cool things in there. There's also a copy of the book. So check it out. There's a super sale going on now, and I think we're going to extend it through the end of the year. So check for that too.
Perfect. And we'll make sure we have the links for all of those in the show notes. So final question.
Yes.
Having heard your journey, and we hit it right out of the gate talking about this idea of what success looks like. So having heard your story, do you see yourself as successful?
Absolutely. 100%. I think there's always more that you can achieve, but I think, as I take that journey back with you and I think about who I was as a freshman at the university or first year at the University of Chicago, absolutely. I feel successful in that. Of course, I have all of these degrees behind me, but also I get to help people. And that's really what feels good and feels like success when I'm like, okay, here's what I've learned. Here's how I can apply it to you. You're feeling better or not. And I got to send you to somebody else. That's fine. But yes, 100%.
Perfect. All right, Dr. Busch, thank you so much for taking time, being a guest on the podcast, for showing up how you do for young adults. Because clearly, if you show up how you did with me, I can only imagine the impact that you have on those college students and feeling better about themselves. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
That's it for this week's Success is Subjective episode. We want to thank our guests for joining Joanna on the show this week and for being willing to share your journey. This podcast would not exist if it weren't for people such as yourself. Stay tuned for our next episode, where you can bet it'll be another amazing human sharing their personal story with the world. Make sure you check out the show notes, where you will find contact information, website details, and all social media for our guest. If you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can email joanna@lilleyconsulting.com. Be sure to check out the lilleyconsulting.com website for additional resources outside of podcasting. Now, if you're listening to the show on Apple Podcasts, please subscribe. And while you're at it, feel free to leave a review. You can also download to listen to the Success is Subjective podcast on other popular podcast apps, such as Audible, Google Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. Thanks again for listening in, and remember, there is no single path through life. Success is what you make it.